You're listening to Cottontail's podcast, part of the Silicon Valley Black Project, which produced the documentary film A Place at the Table about the Black pioneers of Silicon Valley. A Place at the Table can be viewed for rent on Vimeo.com on demand /A Place at the Table STEM. Through Cottontail's podcast, the Silicon Valley Black Project will continue to recognize the contributions made by African Americans. We will be featuring African American professionals, technologists in the fields of engineering, administration, and entrepreneurial pursuits from the past and present. Today, we talk with Janice Edwards, an award-winning talk show host and executive producer of Janice Edwards Bay Area Vista on CreaTV, Sundays at 6 p.m. Ms. Edwards is an Emmy-nominated producer, media coach, published author, and an acclaimed contributor to community empowerment through her media work. Janice, your history in the Bay Area started directly into television. Tell me about that.
Well, I was at KRON, then KPIX, and then I was recruited to KNTV as KNTV was getting ready to launch its new venture from being in the Monterey market to paying NBC for running programming. So I was brought in as community relations director there. So after that, when the whole world was shaken up in broadcasting around 2008, 2009, with the decline in the world and the end of many public affairs, I took Bay Area Vista, which I launched at KNTV, NBC Bay Area, to CreaTV, started airing it there. And then I've been doing, it's still on CreaTV Sundays at 6 p.m. So Bay Area Vista, which I launched at NBC Bay Area, is now in its 19th year.
Fantastic. Wow, how many shows can say that?
Right, and it's been through a lot of iterations. There was one year when I taught a class at the College of San Mateo, and the students were part of the crew. And then, so I've learned a lot and had angel editors and people, and then sponsors like Lyft when I did a special at the San Jose Jazz Summer Fest, and a special about Faith Fancher, who was a KTVU broadcaster and was a member of Friends of Faith, a founding board member. So I've learned different things, and that's why you see a lot on the website too, because in terms of business and really service, it's all about service. So that's a lot of what I've been doing. But yes, I was at NBC Bay Area. That was one of those pivotal times in my life. There are moments that feel like destiny moments and that clarify part of our purpose. And I always knew in television that it was to tell the stories of people who were many times the disenfranchised, voice of the voiceless. But being there, coming in as community relations director and launching the show, and being the first one that this new entity known as NBC3, NBC 11, now NBC Bay Area was a real call to reach out to all communities, make sure they were represented, because at the time people were very upset about the fact that the station was changing. So there were ascertainment meetings where people vented, and I needed to let them know that they were heard so that we could represent the communities, all communities, in a very fair way, and make sure that the new president of the station had a chance to know the community as well as learning the events. So I used to MC about 12 events a month, as well as scheduling other people, but really giving an opportunity for people to make sure that everyone got to know them as this new entity emerged that was really the heart of San Jose through the station.
You make the person you're talking to seem like the most important person in the room.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. I started in radio when I was 16, and then grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, left Atlanta to go to Harvard, and then went to graduate school at UC Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism. And it was very interesting when I started interviewing people, because sometimes people would say, well, you need to get in there and ask more questions. And then because I worked as a reporter as well at Kron's Bait TV, where you only have a minute and a half to tell a story, so you have to get in. But I discovered that I preferred the talk show because I wanted people to feel empowered afterwards. I remember watching the news as a teenager and feeling like I just wanted to pull the covers over my head because it was so depressing. And so part of what I wanted to do is to make sure that people had an opportunity to shine, because someone watching might see a story and say, because that person was able to succeed, I might be able to also. I would think about, how do you want people to feel at the end of the show? And ideally, I want them to feel better than when they started, even if ostensibly nothing in the world has changed, but their vision and their spirit is informed in a way that says, I can get up again. I can connect again.
Because, I've gone to the Black Legends presentations, I think about 3 or 4 years. You're such a positive force.
First of all, thank you for attending the Black Legends. I was so excited when I was inducted in 2019.
That was great. That was really great.
This richness and this history. I was thinking about how my mom always talked about our lives in terms of historical events. My parents grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. A.D. King, Dr. Martin Luther King's brother, was in their wedding, was a groomsman in their wedding. My mom and dad were married by Dr. Benjamin E. Mays of Morehouse College at Sisters Chapel in Spelman. So much rich history.
Yes.
And then she taught with Dr. King's sister, Mrs. Christine King Ferris, at Morehouse. And Mom recruited Edwin Moses to come to Morehouse. And so when the Olympics were in Atlanta years later, he gave her tickets. So just in terms of history and the importance of telling our story, you don't even realize sometimes growing up what it means. I remember being driven to school by Maynard Jackson, Vernon Jordan, Andrew Young were the carpool daddies, along with the moms who alternated for different carpool days. And I remember Mr. Jackson saying, one day I'm going to be the first Black mayor of Atlanta. And he was prophetic, and he was. And so to understand that when you hear people talk about history and then you're connected to it, there's something so powerful. I was the first Black class president at my school at freshman year. And that same year, I was president of the Methodist Youth Fellowship. And I still have the Bible that Joseph Lowry, who was minister of our church, gave me at the age of 14 with my name engraved on it. And inside he wrote love and justice. And, sometimes people would say, oh, he talks so much about the civil rights movement from the pulpit. And people would say, we want to hear more scripture sometimes. But it was all related to our history and our future.
You were raised around excellence, and I'm sure none of them had reached their peak, obviously. They were beginning their careers and putting their lives together without any idea that they would become the icons that they became. But just being around those people had to affect you in a very positive way.
Absolutely. And from my parents and grandparents, my father's mother was very active in the NAACP. And as a matter of fact, she had to leave Georgia at one point because the KKK was coming around to the house, because she was an advocate for those who were being falsely accused of crimes. And I remember on her mantle, she had a picture of herself with this very tall congressman with a big afro. And they would just say, oh, yes, she helped get him elected and he's in California. And then years later, I was an intern in Ron Dellum's office. And when I saw pictures of him, it's like, oh my gosh, he's the one that Grandmother Edwards helped get elected from across the country. So And my mom always believed in exposing me to different things and opportunities. The elementary school that I attended, where these people were the carpool daddies, I studied French from the time I was 5 till I was 12. And she said, well, when you're 14, I'm going to send you to Paris to study. And then my best friend was taking Spanish. So I switched to Spanish. And instead, I wound up going to Mexico to a program when I was 15 where you live with the family for 3 weeks and you have immersive lessons. And I got first place in the state for non-native speakers and first place in the nation in a written Spanish contest. And so it was always a blessing of being exposed to things, and at the same time having a deep spiritual foundation and an unction about helping. My father, who was an attorney, came to see me freshman year at Harvard, and he said he was giving up law because he was disillusioned with it as a vehicle for change. And we sat on a bench. It was a windy day, in Boston where the leaves turn and they're crisp. And I remember sitting on this bench, and he said, baby, do what you love to do, that you get up and do every day, even if you didn't get paid. And my joke has been through the years, I didn't know there were jobs in TV where you don't get paid. Unfortunately, I found some of those, but I remembered that, and my father saying that, especially because about 7 years after that conversation, and I was working in television, he had a dream of us someday owning a TV station together, but he died of a heart attack. He died of heart failure.
Oh, that's too bad.
At a young age, yes. And there were so many blessings in my father's life and being his daughter. But one was that conversation where he really set a tone for valuing what was most important. He came back to Atlanta. My parents divorced when I was young. He came back to Atlanta from Chicago. He cared for his mother for a year until she passed away, just being at the house with her every day. He was in tune with the most important thing. My mom as well, she always wanted me to have better opportunities than she had.
Yeah.
She went back to school and got her master's and her PhD. The year she got her PhD, she said, we're going to see the country. So I was 14, and I say we drove, but I didn't drive. She drove. And I rode from Atlanta down through the southern states. We popped into a little city on the border of Texas and Mexico so I could practice more Spanish. Came to California, Kathy, and in California, first of all, we were in Los Angeles, and I saw this play, Two Gentlemen of Verona, with Clifton Davis, Melba Moore, Raul Julia, and I loved acting. And then we came up to Oakland because I had a cousin who, much to her mother's chagrin, was hanging out with Sly and the Family Stone. But I saw Oakland, and I said, I'm going to live here someday. We went to the Tiki Room at the Fairmont. Years later, on my mother's 65th birthday, I took her to the Tiki Room and had them sing Happy Birthday from that boat that they had where the rain falls down.
Right.
And it was really a full circle moment from remembering being there when I was 14 to being able to have my mom celebrated at the Fairmont.
Wow. Your mother was probably one of the women who either ran the group or was president of the group or were in the group. You know what I'm saying?
And what you said is so important in terms of the getting up. Because during times of discouragement, during times of change and challenge, many times there is a spirit that wants to say, just let go, just give up. Whether it's, we think about 2008 with houses, and that there were programs that helped people keep their houses, although a lot of people lost them. What we're seeing now when we hear about what happened, especially to businesses in African American communities, our businesses, during COVID, and even just, we can't even sometimes wrap our minds around the fact that we are in a pandemic and it's ongoing and there's danger in the air. I was speaking at a summit in February. I was speaking about reset, how we have to push a reset button. A lot of times it is so important to invest in the youth, but people of all ages on either side of 40 need investment and help to survive, so that older years shouldn't be in struggle. when there's so much talent and there's so many abilities, but how do we connect to that? And how is the vision there for this? Sometimes people will say, oh, well, that's history, but that history or her story and his story are things that inform our lives. I have to share with you a story. For me, I was hosting a show called Black Renaissance. I love reading. I've always loved reading. And so a book came in and I thought, oh my gosh, I hope I get this name right. Because you know when you're interviewing, there's a name and it's unusual and you can't insult that person because that's just our framework that says this is different. Right. But that's their name. Right. So this particular name was Barack Obama. And I thought, oh, I hope I get it right.
You're kidding.
So this amazing, charming state senator who'd written his first book was a guest on Black Renaissance. And I remember we all said afterwards, we are going to hear more about him later. And because I'd been born in Chicago, when we connected, he said, oh, well, here's my number. The next time you're in Chicago, give Michelle and me a call. Well, I didn't get back to Chicago.
Oh, no.
I did not stay in touch. Can you imagine? Oh, years later, I wished I'd had that number. But I share that story with interns and different college students many times because I talk about the importance of keeping in touch. Sometimes we talk ourselves out of things or just the challenges of life. Years later, I had the opportunity to interview Valerie Jarrett and share that story with her as well. And so there are moments in time that I think I'm so glad I lived to experience this moment. But we know that those moments that are those high points, like when I interviewed Oprah and I asked her a question and she said, that's a good question. And I thought, oh my gosh, I got Oprah to speak for a moment about something in that way. It was a hallelujah moment. And you think, wow, I'm so blessed to live to experience this. But it's because of all those other moments when we were down and someone said, you can do it. Yeah. I believe in you. Yeah. Get up, girl. Keep going.
That's right.
Keep believing. I interviewed Myrlie Evers Williams when she talked about the assassination of Medgar Evers and the civil rights movement at that time. But she talked about self-care. And because of the huge national arena in which the civil rights movement was occurring at that time, people didn't think about self-care. I mean, obviously, the marches and everything that needed to happen wouldn't have happened if people had said, oh, well, I can't go because of X, Y, and Z. So there was that understanding of being connected to a greater cause, just like after George Floyd's murder. And in so many areas we see it. And at the same time, there's an integration of recognizing that our bodies and our minds and our spirits have needs and being able to come together in community to support each other in that so that we can level up, like the mental health conversations that take place now, like the ones about physical health that take place now. So people know that doesn't have to be your fate. What you're experiencing in your body can be transformed. It's so important to shed light on all of these things. So I'm so grateful that you're doing this and helping us to understand the full journey of the pioneers that we celebrate.
Yeah. And these people that I featured in the film, in particular, Royale Clay, for instance, and Mike Beasley, they have some incredible stories of how they had to overcome so much just to exist from day to day, not to become the giants in industry that they became, but even when they were young men, the things they faced from their own community in some cases. These men were bright, intelligent men, but we don't know the struggles they went through and the mental anguish they went through just to become who they are. They don't talk about being angry or upset. They talk about overcoming. And that's what I want the young people to hear. Is that
I'm sure you probably heard you have to be twice as good. I remember going to the president of my high school and saying I wanted to have a Martin Luther King Day. And because this was before the national holiday was declared, and he slammed the door in my face. And I just stood there for a moment thinking, what just happened?
Yeah,
But it was a predominantly white school. They thought, how dare you speak up? And that is part of the challenge. It becomes that continuing of how do we find our way? There are challenges in, whether it's in television, corporate America, the nonprofit sector. And sometimes it's surprising because you think, well, this should be easy. This should be kumbaya moments, but they're not necessarily. And how do you deal with that? The hurt, the shock, the pain, the missing of a promotion, the being asked to train someone to take your position when you're doing a good job and being in shock about those things. And so all of that is so important because it's not always, well, just go find something else because it's not available. And how last year, when a lot of people became allies and started to understand what was being asked for, because we saw an unbelievable horror watching a man take his last breath in that way, it really awakens people who do have hearts to be inclusive, to say, how can we do better? How can we do more? I remember being teased at my first television job. They said, oh, we've got the Harvard intern running the copy machine for us. And then when I noticed something, I was copying scripts and I noticed an error in there. I said, excuse me, but I just wanted to mention this. And they said, oh, the Harvard intern really knows something. And so it was all this hazing, but at the same time, it helped save them from an embarrassing moment on air. I remember my father saying, you don't think you're any better than anybody else because of where you go to school. I said, no, Daddy, absolutely not. But understanding that sometimes people are poised to react to you in a way that has nothing to do with who you are and how you show up because of their own perceptions. One of the reasons that I got into journalism was being in Spain, and it was amazing, and so many people were great there. But I also had some people who didn't know I was fluent in Spanish, and they were saying, you know, look at that Black woman, and saying things that they didn't think that I understood. And I saw how journalism changes hearts and minds and leads, and then the law follows, because perceptions and people seeing people, just like people hearing the stories that you're creating, helps them expand their perceptions. And when those perceptions are expanded, then there's often an invitation for us to be at tables together, or to own our own tables, build them, and then invite others to be part of it too. But it's a mindset, it's an understanding, it's the things that we don't know that are so important. And that's why we have to work together to learn, to enter the colleges, to enter the boardrooms, to enter the corporations, to enter the recording companies, wherever it is that a calling is, to have the opportunity for access and to learn as much as possible is critically important.
Absolutely.
When I do media coaching, a lot of times that's exactly what I'm sharing with people. It's understanding, because if you have that understanding about how a system works, then you can present in it and you can feel present from the core of who you are. My mom used to prepare students for the MCATs, the LSATs, and all of that. So she saw how people were prepared, students were prepared for the SATs from a young age. And she said, it's not that Black students can't learn, they need to be connected to the system of knowledge that provides that. As women need connection in a certain way, so that when you go into a room of 4,000, you can bring your full self.
Yeah, it was on your website, and I saw pictures of you with Whoopi Goldberg, my favorite lady on the planet, and Colin Powell, a man I deeply admired. Tell me about those experiences.
Whoopi was in San Jose for a program called Unique Lives and Experiences. And I actually had met her years before when I was working at KPIX, CBS 5. She was booked on the show, and her mom used to be her agent. And so knew her from that. But when she came to San Jose to speak at Unique Lives and Experiences, I had this intro that I was doing in front of these thousands of people who were waiting to see her. And she did a stage whisper and she said, "Psst, cut it short." And so I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Whoopi Goldberg." And she laughed and she came out and hugged me. She said, "I love you." So then we had a conversation on stage. And so that picture was taken at that event. With General Powell, I was traveling with people from the Spirit of 45. Warren Haig, Robert Corpus were some of those who I saw, of course, there was a bodyguard near him. And I said, "General Powell, would you take a picture with these World War II veterans?" And so he hesitated for a second because the concert was about to start. And, there was that moment. Then he came over to take the picture and Kim got the picture. So that's how we got that picture. And it was such a great moment for all of us. And just so saddened by his recent passing. On Veterans Day, I always have that as one of the pictures that I share, but that was the story behind the picture of General Powell, and it was a seize the moment opportunity, and I'm so glad that he was kind enough to take a moment to stand with all of us.
Well, I was very impressed. What was one of your best interviews on Bay Area Vista that you can remember?
I would say, well, I think I mentioned the one with Oprah on Black Renaissance. One of my favorite interviews was with someone who was a man who had been homeless. Mm. And because of, I think it's now known as Home First, but it's an organization where they help people get off the street and find them housing. But he also had been estranged from his daughter. And they not only connected him with housing, but they reconnected him with his daughter. And he had a full life, a new life. So many times we pass someone on the streets and we know that was somebody's baby girl, somebody's baby boy. Mm-hmm. And all of these circumstances led them to being there. And I love that interview because it reminds us all of hope. Yes. It reminds us that there are opportunities that are still waiting for us. Another favorite one was my interview with The Rock, and you can see that on my YouTube channel. I have an excerpt from that one. I'd interviewed him twice, and this particular time, he was talking about how growing up, he had counselors who took him aside and helped keep him on the right path. And so with different interviews, mm-hmm. that is something that I always come back to, that with the right opportunity, things can change mm-hmm. in an instant. Mm-hmm. And so being someone who also knows the transformative power of prayer, but knows how much it means to have someone speak into your life, those are some of the interviews that when I think about, over 1,400 now that I've done and I'm privileged to do, those are some of the ones that really stand out in that way because it speaks to that. It's funny when we talk about presence. I was going to share with you, if you have a moment,
yes,
the theme song from my show that was written by Ron Scott, because that came from, for about 8 years, I emceed at the San Jose Jazz Summerfest. And Ron saw me working one night because I was emceeing, but in addition to when you're on stage and you're trying to inspire the crowd, there's the behind the scenes where you're writing. And that particular year, we were also producing a show there. And so he said, "Boy, this girl works hard." He said, "I'm going to write a song." And instead of it just being a Bay Area Vista theme song, he put my name in it. And the theme is Janice Edwards. It's showtime. It's time to shine. And so when I play it, I'm playing it for everyone else because while my name is in it, it's about everyone else having a time to shine. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about my business and what I'm doing now, it's about that as well. It's connecting people to their time to shine, because a lot of times we are hiding in plain sight for a number of reasons, and things can throw us off. Even having years of experience, there are times when it's just like, oh, this day, this life, this pandemic, this pivot, oh my goodness, what do we do? And so that's one of the things that I like to do, and I appreciate that you said that, is shining that light. And that's, let me see if I can play it here.
Janice Edwards, it's showtime. It's time to Janice Edwards, it's showtime. It's time to Janice Edwards, it's showtime. It's showtime. Your time to shine.
That amazing theme song was created by Ron Scott with Bridget Marie Anderson Lopes and Giovanni Paul Jordan performing. Guitar was performed by Rob Lopes, and it's a song that Ron Scott created, and we have been sharing it with the world, and he's going to put it on one of his CDs. So it was really a thrill.
Emceeing the Jazz Fest. How's that coming?
To me, having that opportunity to be around people, to help connect everyone in San Jose to this wonderful, exuberant opportunity to celebrate music and celebrate community is something that I just love. It's really getting to know people, and in a way, you have some moments, but you have an opportunity to connect both with everyone who's there to celebrate. And that festival is one where there's such a wonderful sense of community and harmony and celebration. And then the gospel on Sunday mornings, it just sets a tone. It's really beautiful. And the last time that we did it, it was right after what had happened tragically at the Gilroy Garlic Festival. And so there was heightened security and just a heightened awareness that we wanted to be there to offer something to the community that hopefully promoted a little bit of healing during a very difficult time.
Now, you have mentioned the little girl from Harvard. How did we end up in Harvard?
As I mentioned, my mom graduated from Spelman, my dad from Morehouse.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people thought, well, you just go to Spelman like your mom did. And one of the things that both my mom and I discussed was me finding my own way. There was a song from Pippin that Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5 sang called Corner of the Sky.
Mm.
And it talks about finding your place. And I knew that staying in Atlanta for college was not the place for me.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom provided an opportunity for me to go up. There was a school called Mount Holyoke that I was looking at, and another one, Brandeis University. For some reason, they're all in Massachusetts. My mom provided an opportunity for me to go visit those colleges, and then I came back, and then someone said, "You didn't see Harvard while you were there?" And I thought, no, I didn't. And I guess I had an impression about Harvard. Actually, my father had been admitted to Harvard for law school, but at the time when he was admitted, he had heard about just the challenges, and having grown up in the South, he didn't want to deal with the racist challenges that he was afraid he'd face there.
Mm-hmm.
So it hadn't been on my radar. But then after I came back, I decided to go visit, and I liked the fact that it felt like men and women could be friends as well as having opportunities for romance. Because while I was there visiting, I saw this bus of women from Wellesley come to the Harvard yard, and I thought, and I looked at Wellesley, and I thought, I'd rather be in the yard than the bus. I mean, Wellesley's a fine school too, no shade against anything,
Right.
but for me, it was the right place to be. So that's how I wound up there. And then, there were challenges. I had a professor who said that Black people couldn't be scholars in the classroom.
Oh, yeah.
In Spanish.
I'm not surprised.
And right. And some others, and even another professor who was Black, when I wrote an essay saying that I always expected to go to college, he was offended by that. He said, "How dare you feel like," and I said, well, I did. My mother and father did, and education was very important to them. But he took it as a sense of privilege. And I'm from middle class, so I wasn't one of those who had that silver spoon like some Black people
Mm-hmm.
did, and praise God that they do, because it's a blessing to have wealth and to come from a generation like that. But so there were those kinds of experiences, as well as meeting amazing people that that were leaders in the field. I think that one of the things that was impressive was many times a professor was also someone who was admired worldwide for what she or he had achieved. And so it provided a vision for that kind of connection too. And even the summer before my senior year, going to study in Spain was through a scholarship that I received. And I was the first to ever receive it from Harvard, especially for study abroad. So it was overall, it was a seminal experience. And I'm grateful that I had the opportunity. I didn't want to go to college. I told my mom, I want to act. I don't want to go to school. She said, young lady, you're going to college. So I did. And at that time, they didn't have an acting major, but I did do a play freshman year. But I'm so glad for what I was exposed to. And I wrote for the Harvard Independent. I wrote for a Spanish newspaper called El Mundo. I did some things with radio there. And it was all shaping what I wound up doing and becoming. And years later, I was proud to get my SAG card and my equity card and my AFTRA card. So I did get to do some acting. I had a chance to do a play with Anna DeVera Smith called Sisters at Oakland Ensemble Theater, a 2-woman show. But Harvard was, overall, especially looking back at it, it was a good experience. Challenges like everywhere, but lots of opportunities for growth. People joking about the South, like, do you have running water down there? And then what was funny too was some people from my high school said, why would you want to go up north when you could go to the University of Georgia? And it's like, well, I think that Harvard has more for me. I mean, University of Georgia was great for some people, but for me, it was the place that I was supposed to be.
Well, because you weren't going to be, which you probably didn't know it at the time, but you were not going to be confined to the South. Your spirit and your abilities would take you globally, really. So really, I'm glad you did.
Thank you. I am too. And
Yeah.
I'm blessed, and I'm grateful to God for all of those opportunities and experiences that I had no way of knowing would lead to where they've led.
Well, I think that the one of the best educators in the world is travel, and not just travel as a tourist, but travel and stay and learn a culture. And the fact that you had this language ability as well was probably a real advantage, because you have to understand the nuances of a language in order to speak it well and to understand exactly what you're saying,
Yeah.
Well, in addition to Harvard, then we have the honor of going to Berkeley. How did that happen?
I knew I wanted to go into journalism, and so I was admitted to USC, Stanford, and Berkeley. Berkeley had the more practical program in terms of getting out to interview people. As I thought UC Berkeley would be a new experience in a way, and I knew I wanted to be in Northern California. So that's how that began. And then my internship after I finished Berkeley led to CRON, which is where I was working in television. My internship was ending on a Friday, and they had this 1-year-long program that was designed to provide more opportunities for women and people of color. And the woman who was leaving to get a job in Sacramento, they offered me the opportunity to come on board with that in public affairs. And I did that. And then after that, I got a job for a show there. So I had an opportunity to be the intern on a show called Weekend Extra, which was hosted by the legendary Belva Davis and Roland Post. And Belva was one of the first Black newscasters, reporters, and anchors. And so after that, I worked at CRON for a number of years on a show called TGI 4. So thank God it's 4, like thank God it's Friday. And all of these movie stars came through there. And one weekend, there was this guy that said, oh, he's up and coming. Does anybody want to do the interview? And others said, weekend. And so my husband came with me, and the guy's name was Kevin Costner. So we wound up interviewing. I wound up interviewing him, and it was great. And I've interviewed him 4 times. That was the first. I interviewed him for a chapter in a book that I wrote on quality angles, and it was life in television, theater, and news. And so great experiences that came from that. So worked at Cron, and then I wound up working at a show called The Afternoon Show. People Are Talking in the Afternoon was what it was called. Then it was The Afternoon Show with Ann Fraser and Ross McGowan. And I remember when I interviewed for that show that the person who was head of Cron at the time called me into his office. He said, our show was ending. And he said, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to tell you that that job's already been promised to somebody I know, so you might as well forget about it. And I just listened to him because I'd had a number of experiences with him that were not my favorite experiences in life. And I prayed, and I had a big sister in the spirit who said, oh, honey, we're going to pray for that job for you. And so we prayed, and I also created a little business card with my name on it as producer with the logo from the show. And I would drive by and imagine myself walking in to that station. And praise God, I got that job. That led me to KPIX. And then from KPIX, then I went back to Cron when they were doing something called Bay TV, where I was a reporter, shooter, editor. I wound up going to cover the Million Man March, and wound up getting a student from Howard to be part of my crew. And I was right in front of CNN that day, so people at the station got to see the back of my head every now and then. And God just made a way. I mean, and when I say God made a way with people, my mom providing the tickets, saying, I think you should have this experience. And we got to the mall at 4 a.m, and they were playing Earth, Wind, and Fire and Stevie Wonder. And there was such a community. And even though there was a lot of fear around that, and one of the reasons I wanted to go at that time was because I thought if there are reports of what happened, I want to be able to share what really happened, because there were lots of different thoughts about what might happen there. And as you know, it became a day that was so peaceful and beautiful. And so that was confirmation for me as a young reporter of trusting that, and also working together in community with others to fight for what I believed in. So those are some of the wonderful and challenging experiences along the way, because I talk about it now and you look back and say it's wonderful, but just even getting the ticket, getting through everything, connecting with people, jockeying for a position with my camera on the platform, being a reporter, shooter, editor, because it's hard sometimes when you have to be in front of the camera and behind the scenes. I was one year I was reporting, and these kids had opened a fire hydrant. And so I was there, and as I was shooting, they dumped a bucket of water on my head.
Oh no!
Now, you know, as a black woman having to go be back on camera, and then I had on a pink top and some white culotte shorts, and the pink bled into the white, and I had to go back to the station and be on camera, and then just even that moment too of once I was doused and I was making sure the camera didn't get wet, right? So I got the camera didn't get wet, and then just looking around and in that moment thinking I have to appear tough, because otherwise something else could go wrong here. And I just yelled, "Who did this?" And they all got scared. They said, "Oh, thank you, God," because it was just channeling, you know, someone who could be a warrior and take care of everything, where I was scared and I just wanted to get out of here.
Well, I was going to ask you, what was your worst interview? That might have been it.
I'll tell you one that I will never forget. It was a heart-rending one. I was reporting in Haight-Ashbury about the increase in a certain drug being on the street. There's this 14-year-old girl, and she came up to me. She saw me with the camera. She said, "Oh, what are you doing?" "Oh, I take it." And she said, "I ran away from home 4 months ago, and I'm on speed, but I'm fine." You know, and she was talking a mile a minute and all this, and I spent extra time trying to convince her to go home. She said she didn't come from an abusive family, and she said she would consider it at the end of the interview. I didn't put her on camera. I mean, I didn't put it on air.
Mhm.
I had been interviewing her, and I spent an extra 20 minutes talking to her, which made me late getting back to the station to file the story. But it was the best 20 minutes that I pray that she went home. And it was one of the things that really led me to understanding that I really wanted to make sure that I had a talk show where people would have time to tell their stories,
Yeah.
and that there would be that opportunity for someone to see hope and a different choice as a possibility in whatever was happening in their lives.
So you said at the beginning, you're saying it now, that you hope that people who don't have a voice will have a voice. How committed are you to that statement? And how do
I'm
you,
very committed. Things have changed a lot. They changed in 2008, 2009 with YouTube. They've changed now with the pandemic. Almost everybody has a podcast.
Yeah.
And, everyone's doing things, and was from everything from TikTok to, there's so many ways. So it's not quite the same as before in terms of that, in terms of seeing the need that there's not access. But my commitment to that is really what informs my work and my business and the clients, even to help people who feel like, oh, well, I do this, but I don't necessarily want to be on camera. And they may not have to be, but we can find a way through writing,
Mhm.
through helping them become more comfortable to share their stories and share their gifts and their talents. And sometimes it's CEOs and executives, or it's young athletes, or it's people who are established in business but feel like, oh, I just can't stand that. I had a guest send me something saying, I can't get used to myself on camera. And I said, the critic is always there. When I interviewed Ariana Huffington, she talked about the critic that was telling her she had a funny accent and shouldn't be on TV. There are things that are said to us. There are things in our lives that keep us from being in our best place. I still deal with them. Most of us still do on different days. But my commitment is to help people create a bridge. It's like on my website, I have a free gift.
Mm.
And it talks about that. It's like the steps to really sharing your story. 5 keys to being the star in the reality show of your own life.
Mm.
And it's not that you're necessarily trying to be a reality show star. I don't recommend that. But truly, our lives are our reality.
Yes.
And if you are going to show up as a star in it, it invites you to be more present, to be in touch in a way that you don't necessarily have to be in a lot of situations. So there's some places where you just need to show up and do this, and that's fine, and that is valuable. But we are full beings, and our spirits, our minds, our bodies, and our souls have to feel like there is a place for us. And so my commitment is, whether it's writing, and I even help people with strategic communications because of how the world has changed. Technology helps us, but there are also ways then to hide out and not tend to the tender places within ourselves that are many times, that's part of our creativity.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of what makes us feel like getting up instead of being depressed and saying, I'd just rather stay in bed, that I'm going to give up. So my commitment is to that, is to help us be free of chains that keep us bound. First of all, with ourselves, be able to know our truth. Ideally, with God, being able to be in touch with the fact that we are fearfully and wonderfully made for a purpose, and that we are here, and there is a destiny that is part of why we are here on this earth at this time, connecting with the people with whom we connect.
Yes.
And so if I can support people in facilitating that and tuning into that, and then in helping to have a positive impact in the world, that is my commitment.
Mm-hmm. My dear, I think we've covered most of the world's problems and solved them simultaneously.
Have we solved them? Oh, Kathy, that's it goes boils down to that old song. What the world needs now is love.
Love. Right.
I'm so honored to have been able to visit with you in this way. Thank you for inviting me to be part of your podcast. Thank you for the work that you are doing, your commitment you honor your sister and the legacy of so many with what you're doing. And I just thank you and bless you. And I'm so grateful.
Well, thank you. Your work in the Bay Area media is an example of media excellence. For further information about Miss Edwards, visit her website, thejaniceedwards.com, all one word, where you can download the free workbook on how to become a star in your own reality show. Thank you, Janice. I go away from this interview with a deeper knowledge of the influence media has on all of us. And thank you for listening.